You know, one of the greatest moments of my life? This is going to come to Joe Biden and his disastrous communist presidency and the cover-up and everything else. But you know one of the greatest moments of my life? My dad was in construction. I come from a construction family. His dad did construction. That's what I did. And one time only, when I was a kid, he took me on one of his work trips. He had to go to a Caterpillar. You know, they make the big construction equipment you see all over the place? All the yellow stuff, that's Caterpillar. We had to go to Peoria, Illinois. They had a big Caterpillar factory there. Look at a bunch of equipment. I think I was 6 or 7 at the time. And they had this big arena, almost like a basketball arena, that they filled in with a bunch of dirt. And they had all the equipment out there, and you could drive it, move it around. And the guys were awesome. I was the only kid there. It was me and a bunch of rough, tough construction guys. And they let me run one of the machines. They put me in it, turned it on, and here I am. I can't hurt anything, really, because I'm in the middle of this big dirt thing, but all this power is mine. I can do whatever I want with it. It was, I was 6 or 7. This is almost 40 years ago. I still remember it like it was yesterday. That's how great this moment was in my life. That's essentially what happened to the United States of America during Joe Biden's presidency. Only it wasn't a 7-year-old child who got unbelievable amounts of power and could do whatever he wanted with it. It was America hating communists. You see, we are suffering now. There's a reason we're still talking about this. We are suffering now, and we will continue to suffer for I don't know how long. The disaster of Joe Biden's presidency, if you just think about all the illegals they brought in, may very well be, on a long enough timeline, a mortal wound from which the United States of America cannot recover. But why was it so bad? How could you destroy that much in 4 years? It's almost as if there was a focused effort to destroy. We're not talking about some normal Democrat doing some Democrat policies and, oh, whoopsie, that didn't work out. It's almost as if there was a focused effort by people who hate the country to burn down as much of it as they could with the time they had. And that's exactly what happened, you see. We are now treated to the latest story. This story is, well, I've been doing politics for about 20 years now. I didn't really get into politics till I got out of the Marine Corps. But since then, because it's my nature, I've obsessed over it. I do what you do. I read, I listen, I watch. I'm just obsessed over history and politics and things. I've never even heard of something like this before.
And Alex, the fact of the fake town hall is not actually the worst part of the story that you report in the book.
Yes, other campaigns have used fake town halls. Now, I would say those town halls usually are in addition to real town halls. Joe Biden was doing neither. This fake town hall was in order to film it so they could make it into campaign commercials. They filmed it in Delaware with supporters. But Joe Biden, at this point, this is the spring of 2024, Joe Biden's town hall, which was closed to press, was so bad that campaign officials determined that it was not usable for a campaign commercial. So they took 90 minutes, 2 hours out of the president's day. They filmed an entire town hall, and they determined that it was not usable. Now, some people say this was because Joe Biden was incoherent. He could not really articulate his thoughts in a pithy or even semi-normal way. Some people just said, like, the lighting was bad.
I just want you to marinate on this for just a brief moment. I know you already know this because we talked about it, but the job of the presidency, the job of the president is unbelievably stressful, and the obligations are endless, and the stakes are enormous. I talked the other day, Donald Trump put up a long post. We saw it all. The media reported it all. Donald Trump got up, had a bunch of things to do in the morning, and then Donald Trump had to sit down, and he spent 2 hours on the phone with Vladimir Putin, the head of Russia, trying to negotiate some sort of a framework for a peace deal. He then hung up the phone. He had to get a hold of Zelensky and talk to him about the peace deal he just negotiated. He then had to reach out to the head of the EU and the head of France. And this is one brief period of time in one moment of one day that Trump had to deal with as president. And that's not because he's a Republican. That's the job as president. It could be you, me, anybody. They put you in that chair. Your responsibilities, the things you have to deal with, are beyond belief. And Joe Biden was so brain dead. They created a fake town hall, which is hilarious and amazing, by the way. It's been done before, though. You hire a bunch of your supporters, bring in, you cut off everybody, you don't allow the media in, as they said, and then you get some fake questions that sound real. The TV cameras record it, and you look like you're being Mr. Man of the people, fielding questions from people, answering questions. And at the end of that, well, they edit. And you can't even imagine the magic editors can do. I didn't really realize this until I ran for Congress 2 times myself, and I saw we would go film for 8-9 hours in a day, and from that 8-9 hours of filming, they would produce one 30-second TV commercial. That's how much editing there is. Cut this out, cut that, move this, move that. They did it with Joe Biden, and he was still so incoherent, they didn't have a TV commercial, and they just scrapped the entire thing. 4 years, he didn't do anything. But that, of course, is not the point. That begs the question, well, who was doing stuff? Because there was a lot of stuff done. It's not as if nothing got done. Opening up the border, you had to do that on purpose. Remember, Donald Trump secured the border during his first 4 years. The border was secure when Joe Biden took over. So opening it up, you have to make a focused effort. Who did that? Who decided to sign all these ridiculous executive orders? Who banned the export of natural gas? Just horribly destructive things with no purpose whatsoever. Who found this law and that justification to bring in more foreigners and more foreigners and more foreigners by the million? But somebody was doing something. Who signed all those pardons? Remember what a story that was? At the end of Biden's presidency, every president pardons some people, and usually they're dirtballs, and nobody really cheers. Trump did it, Obama did it, Bush did it, Clinton did it. They all do it, and it's always kind of a gross process. And then Joe Biden does it exponentially more. Who was doing all that? Well, that's an important question, isn't it? Because we keep referencing communists around Joe Biden. Ed Martin went on with Mark Halperin. He went on Mark Halperin's show. I don't know why I struggle with Mark's name. He's a great guy. He went on his show, and Ed Martin named some names.
I had a whistleblower in my office 10 days ago, senior Democrat, saying, look, it was these 3 people that controlled access, and they were making money off of it. The gatekeepers, different characterization of who was using the access, but the gatekeepers were Klain and Anita Dunn and Bob Bauer. And those 3 were really dominant characters in the White House. Ricchetti a little bit, and obviously Jill, but I think that was the 3. I was with this person, and I said, what about Susan Rice? What about some of these others? And they said, no, these were the ones.
Ron Klain is an obvious one, Joe Biden's chief of staff. We'll set him aside for the time being. Maybe we'll come back to him. Anita Dunn. Maybe that name sounds familiar to you. Hopefully it does. Glenn Beck deserves all the credit in the world because it was 15, 16 years ago. Glenn Beck discovered this lady by the name of Anita Dunn who was working for Barack Obama. But Anita Dunn has some interesting views.
And then the third lesson and tip actually come from 2 of my favorite political philosophers, Mao Zedong and Mother Teresa, not often coupled with each other. But the 2 people that I turn to most, in 1947, when Mao Zedong was being challenged within his own party on his plan to basically take China over, Chiang Kai-shek and the nationalist Chinese held the cities. They had the army, they had the Air Force, they had everything on their side. And people said, how can you win? How can you do this? How can you do this against all of the odds against you? And Mao Zedong said, you fight your war and I'll fight mine.
She really loves him, admires him. Mao Zedong murdered 50 million people. Mao Zedong, he gathered men, women, children, and he forced them onto communal farms in China, forced them to work the fields, but not for themselves, you see. He worked many of them to death. The old ones were worked to death. Pregnant women didn't last very long. Neither did the children. Can't work under those conditions for long. Of course, government can't manage such things, so people begin to die by the million. Mao then continued to control more and more and more, and millions and millions and millions and millions of people died. This is a human being who was so sadistic that one of the members, a lifelong friend of his, challenged him in really a fairly benign way after he'd killed 50, 60 million. We don't even know the number, 50, 60 million Chinese people. Mao remembered that. He remembered being challenged publicly, never forgot it. And you see this friend of Mao's was a diabetic, needed medication. You know what happens to somebody when they don't get what they need when they're diabetic? You know what happens to the body? How they are ravaged, tormented before they die? Mao had this person arrested. He not only denied him his medication on purpose, he had video cameras set up in the cell so Mao could watch over and over and over again as his lifelong friend died in complete and utter agony, essentially tortured to death. That's how Mao handled his political opponents. That's the type of guy Mao was. Now, the lady who clearly loves and admires him, she was, at least in part, running the United States of America for 4 years. Now, let me ask you again, do those executive orders make more sense now? Does the mass importation of rapists and murderers and drug dealers like we've never seen before in the country makes more sense now, doesn't it? What kind of a person, what kind of a president would hand out thousands of pardons to just some of the most vile murderers? Why? Who in the world would want these people back on the streets? Makes more sense now, doesn't it? Makes a lot of sense. And remember, when Joe Biden couldn't function anymore, and now it was public, now everybody knew it, there was a central figure trying to keep him in the race.
What do you say to members of the House of Representative Democrats who are on the phone with reporters saying that the president needs to step down?
We're basically saying the president is the only person out there who's ever beaten Donald Trump, and he will do it again. You know, and we're all going to work together on this.
Oh, that's a little bit more revealing now, isn't it? I have no doubt Anita Dunn wanted him to stay right where he was so she could continue to put the United States of America to the torch. How in the world did we end up with a Supreme Court justice like Ketanji Brown Jackson, a radical, insane, America-hating communist nutjob who now sits on the highest court in the land? I think you know how she got there. And speaking of the pardons, I talked to Ed Martin about it last week when he was on.
We saw something that no one's ever seen. Look, Donald Trump has done historic stuff, and then people say we've never seen a president who tweets or does this and that, the other thing. What Joe Biden, the unprecedented nature of what he did, back in time, blanket pardons for any crime, 14 years, this is not normal. And he did it over areas that we see major questions. The pardons over COVID, blanket pardons over the COVID stuff. You know, again, at a certain point you say, might be plenary, might be allowed, but it looks like it's covering things up, right? It looks like we've got some conflict. So again, we are not supposed to be wimps. I know, Jesse, you know this. We're not supposed to be, silly about being soft. We should ask questions. If you do stuff that's unprecedented, we should ask questions.
Why would they take such unprecedented steps? Because having communists who hate America in the Oval Office was unprecedented. That's why we saw unprecedented things, like the 7-year-old who was given a piece of construction equipment. Do with it what you want. We sat communists behind the desk in the Oval Office for 4 years, and we turned them loose. And that's why we still suffer from it. Somebody better go to jail. All that may have made you uncomfortable, but I am right. I would thank you for coming to my YouTube channel, but I know how brilliant it is, and I know you love it here. So subscribe and watch. We're going to start really ramping things up and putting some funny stuff, some interesting stuff out there, some collaborations. Either way, my YouTube channel is officially the place to be. So stick around.